Let's be honest, if you've ever had to click through a mandatory cybersecurity training just to get it over with, you are definitely not alone. We all know this stuff is important, but why is so much of it, well, so forgettable? Today, we're going to dig into why that happens and, more importantly, how to actually fix it.
So, let's kick things off with a pretty staggering number. Over 90% of all data breaches involve some kind of human error. We're talking about a careless click, a password that's way too simple, or falling for a really clever scam. This means your people aren't just one part of your defense, they are your main line of defense.
Okay, so the stakes are obviously incredibly high, but here's the reality. Even with all those required webinars and boring slideshows, only about 1 in 10 employees actually remembers the training they get. That's a huge gap between the risk you face and what people actually retain.
And that brings us to the big question for today. Why is all this critical training so easy to forget? I mean, if you've ever had to sit through a dull check-the-box security session, you probably already have a few guesses.
All right, let's break this down. First, we need to understand the root of the problem, something called the forgetting curve. Then, we'll walk through 3 really powerful solutions: how to make training personal, how to make it engaging, and maybe most importantly, how to make it actually last. So first up, let's talk about the big psychological reason why that annual, one-and-done training session is basically set up to fail from the very beginning. The main culprit here is something called the forgetting curve. It's a proven psychological principle that says our brains are wired to forget most new information really quickly unless we use it or review it. So that big security briefing you do in January, yeah, it's mostly gone by March, let alone next December when a real threat pops up.
And you can really see the impact of this curve right here. Without any kind of follow-up, we hold on to maybe a quarter of what we learned after just 1 week. But if you add in some regular reinforcement, that retention just skyrockets. This is the perfect illustration of why one-and-done training just doesn't cut it.
So how do we actually fight back against this forgetting curve? Well, the first step is to stop treating people like they're just nodes on a network and start making the training connect on a human level. You absolutely have to make it personal. What's really interesting here is the total shift in focus this demands. Instead of trying to force every employee into some generic training box, the best programs actually adapt to them, to their specific jobs, the actual tools they use every day, and their real-world habits. And here's a perfect example. A generic warning about phishing is super easy for everyone to ignore. But training your finance team to spot fake invoice requests that are designed to look exactly like the ones they process all day, now that's relevant, it's specific, and that's the kind of training that sticks. You know, it all comes down to one thing: making it matter to them. This means using real stories, not just a list of abstract rules. It means showing how good security habits can protect their family online, not just the company network. And for sure, it means always explaining the why behind a policy in plain language anyone can understand. Okay, so once the training feels personal, the very next step is to make it active. We have to move away from these passive lectures people just have to sit through and turn it into an experience they can actually participate in. In other words, we have to make it engaging. The secret here is to use a blended approach. Don't just rely on one format, you gotta mix it up. Use interactive online modules, host live workshops where people can ask questions, run hands-on phishing simulations so they can test their skills safely, and use bite-sized lessons. This kind of variety works for different learning styles and keeps things from getting stale.
And a huge thing we have to avoid is this: cognitive overload. Trying to cram everything into a 3-hour marathon session just completely overwhelms the brain. It's why short, focused micro-lessons, like a quick 5-minute video on making strong passwords, are so much more effective. They respect people's time and their attention spans.
But look, knowledge is pretty useless if you don't know how to act on it. The goal is always to bridge that gap by giving people practical tools. A simple checklist or a what to do if you click the link cheat sheet empowers people to do the right thing when it really, truly matters. So now, we've got training that's personal and it's engaging, but how do you make it actually stick for the long haul? Well, that brings us to the final critical piece of the puzzle: building a real culture of security. This chart says it all, really. The most effective organizations don't treat security like a once-a-year event. A third of them are putting out training content every single month, and most of them do it at least quarterly. These frequent touchpoints are the perfect antidote to that forgetting curve we talked about.
And check this out, look at the power of meeting people where they already work.
Almost 90% of employees say they'd actually act on quick security nudges if they came through platforms they already use, like Slack or Teams. These small, constant reminders are an incredibly powerful way to build good habits over time.
But tools are only one part of the equation. A true culture shift has to start from the top. When leaders are visibly involved and championing security, it sends a powerful message to everyone else. And it's so important to use positive reinforcement. Celebrate the teams who report phishing attempts. Don't just punish the ones who make a mistake.
And you might be wondering, does this whole approach actually work? Well, the data is pretty clear. A massive 89% of leaders reported that their company's security posture improved after they switched to an ongoing, continuous training program. It's not just a nice idea, it delivers real, measurable results.
So in the end, it really all comes down to a choice. Your employees can be your weakest link, untrained and unengaged, or with the right approach, they can become your strongest defense, a vigilant, engaged human firewall.
Because the ultimate goal here isn't just for people to memorize a bunch of rules, it's for them to actually change their behavior, to make secure choices almost instinctively, as a normal part of their day-to-day routine. So I'll leave you with this one question to think about. Is your current security training just about ticking a box on a compliance checklist? Or is it truly building a lasting culture of security? The answer to that question could make all the difference.